Welcome back to the Determined People podcast and our interview with Christian Moore. I think you'll agree Christian is one fascinating man and with an incredible life story. And you'll see how God put people in his life to position him uniquely to be where he is and to help the people that he helps, kids struggling with resilience. So strap in and get ready for our next section of this interview. Listen well. And we confuse success and fulfillment, and they're really two different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the final analysis of it. So you know, and you talk about in the resilience breakthrough, you talk about flipping the switch, taking pain and finding purpose in it, and you literally did that in that dean's office.
No, absolutely.
I mean, I can tell from the raw emotion you left it all on the field in that office.
Absolutely.
He probably wasn't very hugging you back. He's probably waiting for you to get the hell out of his office, right?
Yeah, it's cool. I got to see him about 15 years later at a grocery store. Ran into him, and about that time we had reached about probably like our first 1 million students. And I remember saying to him, you know, "Hello, Dean," and talking. I said, "Hey, I fulfilled that promise." And he goes, "No, I've been tracking you a little bit. We're aware of what you're doing. We're dang proud of you." And that was a beautiful moment. And he gave me a real hug. Yeah, but we live in a world that we only respect people oftentimes when they have success, and that's not okay.
Yeah, or pedigree. You didn't come in with a pedigree. You weren't from a family.
Yeah, as the first person in my immediate family at that time to even go to college, graduate from college.
Yes.
First.
Yeah, but you didn't come in with accolades and high SAT scores and everything else. You came in pretty much, you know, what you have now, I guess, is a 7th grade math or 6th grade math comprehension, 7th grade reading comprehension.
Yeah.
Yet you graduated from, and you got a master's degree.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you're a licensed clinical social worker.
Yeah, that's a crazy journey. It's pretty great. But because of these laws and advocacy, a lot of people with learning disabilities are becoming teachers, doctors, lawyers, national speakers, and it's because we know people with learning disabilities have average to above average intelligence. We just process the world differently. It's like you were saying the other day, our education system is set up for a certain type of learning. And if you don't fall in those categories, it will chew you up, spit you out, eat you for dinner again. But hopefully, I think we'll make some progress there. I think we are making some progress there.
I hope so. I'm not in education, but I really hope so, because if you don't fit into that mold, you start getting a message that you're dumb, and you're not dumb.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just have a different kind of intelligence. We put such a premium on IQ and degrees and everything else. When intelligence is just one piece of the equation. You better have a good personality, but most importantly, I think the greatest correlation to having a successful career life is adaptability.
Oh, absolutely.
How quickly can I adapt to change? And you adapted right there in that moment.
Yeah. So in humans, you talk about adaptability, and we talk about this in the book a little bit. It's one of the key things to resilience. So we know change is going to happen, and the ability to adapt to change is highly coordinated. Highly tied to resilience.
Yes.
Those two words go. You mentioned flipping the switch. I just want to say one thing about flipping the switch is, I've created kind of a resilience model. One of the first things you have to do to be resilient is you have to have something to bounce back from. You have to have suffering. When that suffering kicks in, the fastest you can say to yourself, how do I use this suffering as a resource, as my best friend? That's flipping the switch. It's kind of the gateway to resilience, is to flip that switch. And again, flipping the switch comes from a question. How do I use this as my best friend? And the minute you make that decision, not that the problem goes away, the world changes around you, the way you see things. There's an inner hope that almost instantly comes when you ask yourself that simple question. And that's the flip the switch question. So I just want to plant that seed there.
Absolutely. And one thing, you've probably seen on one of my videos or maybe something I wrote about, I make fun of, in a gentle way, the participation trophy generation. Participation trophies. I wouldn't let my kids have them when they were growing up in sports. We won a trophy. No, you didn't earn it. You didn't come in first, second, or third. So, but it was a lesson that I could teach. Now they weren't real happy about it, but today they could have give a damn about having a participation trophy sitting in my home, right? Because it's like I'm proud of my child's participation. No, because what you do learn from sports is a great teaching tool. It teaches accountability, responsibility. It teaches you love for your teammates and that you rely on each other. But it also teaches you the way that the pain of loss, the suffering which you pointed to, says, I don't want to ever feel this way again.
Yeah.
I've read of so many professional athletes that say, in the off season, all I could think about was how painful it was.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel that way again. And what they would do is they would prepare harder than they ever had. They would condition better. And that would be pervaded over to their teammates. In the next year, maybe you got a Super Bowl champ. Maybe not. A lot of things got to happen right. But it's that pain of suffering. It's not going to kill us. But we look at somebody like, and I use this as an example. We look at somebody like our mutual friend Daryl Scott, founder of Rachel's Challenge, right? If Daryl didn't have great strength of character, losing his daughter in a horrible, horrible murder, for the audience that doesn't know Daryl Scott, and he's a future podcast guest, but Daryl's daughter, Rachel, was the first child killed at Columbine in 1999. But if he didn't have strength of character and a lot of resilience he had learned early, he wouldn't have bounced back from that. He would not have been able to do he wouldn't have been able to live a fulfilling life after her death.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up our mutual friend Daryl, because he's one of the major people who inspired me to write the book, The Resilience Breakthrough. I remember the moment it happened, he invited me. He's a mentor to me. I've known him for several years, and probably one of the greatest honors of my life. He said, "Hey, did you visit Rachel's grave with me?" And man, that was literally a life-changing experience. And we're standing there at her grave, and he turns to me and he's like, "Christian, this is the most pain I've ever experienced. I was losing my incredible daughter, and as a parent, you can't imagine." And I'm just sitting there, talking to him about it. I'm asking him a few questions, and then he turned to me and started explaining to me the opportunity that came out of this. And Rachel wanted to help heal this world, and was a huge advocate of justice. Rachel was as well. And she had written some things and stuff about that. And he just said, "Hey, I'm going to carry out her legacy, and we're going to make sure we're going to lower bullying in these schools." And he's impacted millions and millions of students, and even adult students, everybody across the country. Seriously, if you don't know what Rachel's Challenge is, check out rachelschallenge.com or .org. Yeah, rachelschallenge.org, because this is one of my mentors, y'all. You guys got to check into this incredible guy. And
through Daryl's how we met.
That's right.
That's how we met. It's through Daryl. And if he said to me, he said, one guy you need to meet, talking about me, is Christian Moore, because you guys will get along famously. Okay, great. And I trust Daryl completely. If he tells me something, I trust him. And he was right. So here we are at Sundance having a conversation.
It's funny, my son Carson last night turns to me and said, "Wow, man, you he's a lot like you, because I talk a lot. He talks a lot." And so it's a funny moment.
He's right. Did you ever read the Superman comics when you were a kid?
A little bit.
So you had like the Superman, and then you had the Bizarro Superman. I'm the Bizarro Superman. So you have the parallel universes there, right?
Wow, that's a flashback.
Let's move into, you identified 4 types of resilience. As I recall, you've been working very hard, and you needed to. Your business partner said, "Christian, you need to take a break. Stop traveling." And you were in your office, and you found and you started writing on a whiteboard. And in the book, you said you had a breakthrough, and you had danced a little jig. Well, we don't need you to dance a little jig today, but
I'll tell you where the jig came from. I'll tell you where the jig comes from. It's interesting. Most people like me as social workers, we work with people with high trauma who are hurting themselves and others, making bad decisions, maybe because of this trauma. But I started realizing one thing I learned about literally meeting millions of people traveling this country, this world, is there's another demographic that people like me as therapists don't interact with a lot. They don't come into therapy a lot. And these are people who have high trauma. And I meet these kids, they're like juniors in high school. Their mom's in prison. Their dad's an alcoholic. They might be in foster care. And I'd be talking to these kids, and like, "Yeah, I got a scholarship to Johns Hopkins." I'm like, "What? You have all this trauma and you're thriving." Now remember, mental health workers don't work with the population of people with high trauma that are thriving. We work with the opposite population most of the time. And so I just hit me one day. I said, why don't I start studying people with high trauma that are thriving? And so I wrote down hundreds of names on the board, people I knew, celebrities. And I just started thinking, okay, what are they tapping into that enables them to have extremely high trauma? And I was reading a book, And one of the first times I noticed this concept, I was reading the story of Christopher Reeves, which you're talking about Superman.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's Christopher Reeves and the opposite of me, tall, dark, handsome, talented, right? And probably a great student. This guy was like this Renaissance guy. You know, could mountain climb, outdoors.
He played Superman on
Yeah,
TV.
yeah, and he played Superman on TV, right?
Movies.
The most popular Superman,
Yeah.
I would say. So Christopher Reeves, everybody knows the story. He's thrown off the horse, and he's paralyzed. And he's rock bottom, of course. This is to his wife. I don't want to live. I mean, I was at the top of the world. I'm rock. Just please help me check out of this world. And she negotiates with Christopher and just says, you know, just stay alive for me, the kids. You can see she's buying him time. And she says, look, Christopher, you got to take this challenge and maybe you can make a difference in the paralysis community. And everybody knows the rest of the story, man. He flips the switch and he literally puts all his energy into rehab and makes some of the biggest progress, you know, being, you know, paralyzed. It makes a huge difference in the paralysis community. It inspires the world at that time and stuff. Those younger might not remember the story, but it was just, I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, wait a minute, he didn't get rid of the problem. He used the problem, and I realized, I'm thinking to myself, there's no law in the universe that says you cannot take suffering or pain or opposition and create a productive outcome with it. There's no rule that says you can't do that.
That's right.
And I remember, and by the way, I said to my wife, I want that on my tombstone. There's no law in the universe that says you cannot take, you know, difficulty and, you know, create a productive outcome of it. And I started thinking, and I read Oprah's biography. She was physically abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused. She talked about.
Oh, she should never have a career in media.
Oh, yeah. She looked the part and all this stuff, you know, and just got lit up. And but she talked about her anger, her rage, her hurt, and how she was going to take that and create healing in the world and bring people together. I'm like, wait a minute, there's no law that says you can't do that. Right. Like, why do some people do that? And other people really don't have much exposure to that. And I was just fascinated by that. And I had a couple months off. So I write all these names down on the board and I'm like, this person's tapping into something called relational resilience, something called street resilience, resource, rock bottom. I'll highlight those in just a second, but I want to share with you, there's one thing, 2 or 3 things we have to do before we access where resilience comes from internally. I had read hundreds of books on resilience. They would tell me the attributes of resilience: hard work, determination, perseverance. But I wanted to know where it comes from internally. But mostly what I read in books, it was up here. It was like this mental, you know, you process, you know, hard work, determination, these skills. But in my own life, and when I study people, I notice people who are resilient, usually, you know, they're tapping, of course, in their head and their heart, but most of their motivation is coming from here. And I was kind of fascinated by that. What I mean by that is, you know, one of the biggest fuel sources is relationships. You know, one good thing that's come from COVID, we know human beings are social creatures. We need that human interaction. That's that relational resilience I was just talking about, but I realized, so the first thing you have to be resilient, you have to have suffering. You have to have something to bounce back. And resilience is the ability to bounce back. So you've got to have something to bounce back from. So if you have that perspective, when you're dealing with a crisis, it's actually a tremendous opportunity. And so, because you got opposition to bounce back for, and we know that's where human growth takes place, is in that suffering and using it. And one reason we need to give ourselves a lot of grace, because when we have suffering, oftentimes we make a lot of mistakes. Our depression is going to go up, our anxiety is going to go up, and the human condition is to mess up, make mistakes. I had someone say to me a couple of years ago, if we didn't mess up or make mistakes or have flaws, we may as well be artificial intelligence or be a robot. What's most special about the human condition isn't our perfection and being highly successful. It's the ability to have some failure, to have some setbacks, learn from them, and push through. And the ability to do that is I believe, is kind of the birthplace of where resilience comes from. So real quick, so you have to have suffering, and then you have to flip the switch. You have to say to yourself, how do I use that suffering as my best friend? And then the next thing we want to do is be around as many unconditional people as possible. I always tell people, write down the 10 people you spend the most time with. If more of those people are unconditional, you know, conditional is, you know, I'll be there for you, I'll love you if you have my same views, my same beliefs, my same perspective. That's conditional love. I'll
And
love you
as long as you're
dot,
not
dot, dot.
suffering,
Yeah, you're not
as
suffering.
long as the shit's not hit your fan, and if the fan in your life, and I don't have to be there to support and
Absolutely.
encourage you. Yes.
Oh man, amen, amen. You find out who your friends are too when you hit that, when you have that suffering, and so as a business owner, I have to be conditional sometimes. If my employees don't do A, B, or C, I might have to let them go. That's a conditional relationship, and it's interesting. Pay attention. Conditional relationships are always attached to a couple things. If something's conditional, it's going to give you more money, more power, more control over another human being. So you got to pay attention to that. Unconditional love, that my grandfather, Mama Jackson, my grandmother Sean showed me unconditional love, and that is I'll be there for you in your successes and your failures. I'm not going nowhere. It's unconditional. So what I tell people to do is write down these 10 names. If 6 or more of those names are conditional, you're going to have more depression, more anxiety, more fear. If 6 or more of those relationships are unconditional, Mama Jackson would always say to me, when you end up on death row, Christian, the only person that's going to be visiting you is me. and a couple years ago, I was talking to her, I was like, were you serious about that? Because you said it 100 times. She's like, absolutely. And that's the power of that unconditional love. I'll be really frank with you. This might not be politically correct to say, but the reason why I spend a lot of my time advocating for civil rights and social justice is the most love I've ever felt is in African American home, that unconditional love. And I can only speak from my own experience, but I spend a lot of time in the white community, and I've lived half my life in the most conservative part of the United States and the most liberal part of the United States and stuff. The difference between the Baltimore area and Provo, Utah is quite a bit different.
Pretty vast, yes.
And that love I have felt, the most unconditional love I've ever felt, when I was speaking in a prison to inmates, and feeling that level of love and non-judgmental, and then being raised in an African American home. And to be very frank with you, a lot of times when I'm in a white community, it's a little bit more on conditions. I'll love you if you do. In my experience, I'm not speaking across the board, let me be really clear. But in my experience, in interacting a lot. And so people always say, why do you do so much work around social justice, or wish you'd speak out less and stuff? And it's because it's in those communities and people who are struggling with it economically, social justice, that's by far the most love I've ever felt. I wish I could let America know that. A lot of times where people are like, man, it's so harsh on different groups, or saying this group isn't working as hard as this group and all this craziness. There's a huge misunderstanding there. And so again, that's really, I want to share where I learned unconditional love. Of course, was through Mama Jackson and being raised in those communities. And again, I have a big debt to pay because of that. And so
that debt is fuel for you as
well. Yeah, absolutely, huge fuel. So the next thing we got to tap into, so is again, looking at mom, you got to have suffering. You got to flip the switch. You want to be around as many unconditional people as possible, because if you're around unconditional people, your anxiety goes down. John being here with me the last 2 days, I'm with someone who's unconditional. He's one of the most non-judgmental people in the world, and so I enjoy being around you. You know what I mean? Because you're a very safe human being, and you just want to love and support people where they're standing, and that's hard to find people.
Judging other people keeps them away, because they can pick up on that. They can pick up on that. I want to go back and say a couple things you said. Number one, you mentioned political correct. I'm not politically correct, and I'm not willing to learn to be. Okay, I think political correctness is I think it'll destroy our world. It's just political correctness is like trying to teach people to not be a dick. Okay, that's what it is. Don't be rude. Okay. No amount of laws can change the heart of mankind. It's like with you cannot legislate evil out of the heart of mankind. You cannot. Laws don't work. They're more punishment or whatever. It may sound good and to people, make them feel more safe, but you're not going to change the heart of mankind with that. You only change it through WhyTry, through Rachel, through so many other things people that are doing great work. And goodness transcends everything. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Mexican, Indian. I'm American Indian, which is Native American to be politically correct. But it's just that goodness transcends everything. Good people are out there. You don't always have to look so far to find them too. They're there.
Oh, amen. I think authenticity, speaking truth. We're in a world where people are scared to death. Just say something true.
Oh, we're gonna offend somebody with this podcast. It just happens. I put out these inspirational videos, these 20, 30-second deals, and I have people that make fun of me and joke. You're an idiot and you're Mr. Nice and all this. And
Hey,
You're probably the person I'm talking to.
Hey, I always say, if everybody likes what you're doing and saying, you're probably not doing enough.
You're probably not doing it.
When Martin Luther King said we should be at the front of the bus, they killed him. And so when you're making a difference in this world, you will be attacked.
They killed Lincoln. Lincoln emancipated the slaves. They killed him.
Yeah. The more good you do, the more you're going to be attacked, especially when you're advocating for the elderly and children. If everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably not doing enough. You got to push the envelope because that's the population that doesn't have the voice, that doesn't have the respect, the elderly and children.
I think I told you I have a short prayer I say daily. It's like, give me a voice for the voice. Let me be a voice for the voiceless. Let me speak for those who feel like that they can't. They can, but they feel like that they can't. They're afraid to stand up and speak. It's like, I'm not afraid to, and you criticize me, that's fine. You're not going to hurt me. Okay? Don't kill me. Don't kill me, okay? Don't take it that far. But and I'll tell you something funny that is true. Is like we talk about unconditional love, and truly unconditional. I told my sons a few months ago, I said, guys, I love you unconditionally. And nothing can ever change that. In that way, I am like God, because my love for you guys doesn't change, no matter what you do, okay?
Amen.
It doesn't change. Now, I don't always like you. I don't always like the decisions you make. And they look at me and go, yeah, we understand that, Dad. We kind of feel the same way about you. And I was like, but it's true. I mean, nothing my kids can do can ever change the way I feel about them. But I may not approve or like what they do. And they're not out, robbing banks or stealing cars. But it's like, but it's just, when you raise two boys, they're 28, 26 right now. They're good, character-driven young men. I'm proud of the young men that they're turning out to be. You're going to see some stuff that they're going to do, but what the hell were you thinking? Oh, you weren't. But you got two boys. You've had that. You've had that experience.
Absolutely. At 52 years old, and I only have so much time left on this earth, and I want to spend as much time as possible around people who are unconditional, because it's euphoric. It is a rush. It is the highest level of happiness I've ever experienced, is to be around someone that knows all my strengths, all my weaknesses, all my flaws, and that love just keeps flowing.
Doesn't use them against you, or point them out to you, or you're a real loser because of this. No. But it frees you when you're around people that are not judgmental, that really unconditionally accept you. It frees you to truly be yourself. And you know what that also does? It makes creativity explode.
Amen.
Because then your mind is not thinking, I got to be on guard with this guy or this girl. I can be myself, and that means we can, just freebase ideas, right?
It's awesome.
Just toss them out.
It's interesting. I'm reading articles. A lot of corporations now are creating that environment, safe place to not be perfect, to mess up, to make mistakes, and to be in a non-judgmental business environment. Even they get way more productivity out of their employees. They have breakthroughs on products, on all kinds of things. So it's nice to see that even what we're talking about now is and the research behind it is being carried out in the business world, which I never thought that would happen, but it's really amazing to see what's going on right now.
I hope they do that without political correctness, because Jack Welch did that with GE in
That's
1982 when he took over Neutron Jack.
There
was a book written in 1994 called Control Your Destiny or Someone Else Will. And it was the story of how Jack Welch turned the culture of GE as being a stodgy, old, predictable, Navy suit, red tie, white shirt organization into one of accountability, responsibility, and he would allow his senior people, executive level people, to make colossal mistakes. But take ownership of it, be accountable, and they wouldn't do it again because there were some pretty smart people there. And that allows that person to flourish, to grow, to truly be willing to be an entrepreneurial in a corporate world. So I hope that they do that with integrity, but also without trying to be too politically correct or whatever. That's
well said. I totally agree with that. But I do want to get back to those four sources.
Let's touch base on each. Just give me a high gloss on. There's four types of resilience, which you mentioned earlier: street resilience, resource, relational resilience, and rock bottom. I want you to touch on street, resource, and relational. And define them quickly, and then we're going to end on talking about rock bottom.
Just kind of want to highlight this real quickly. So out of the first of the four is relational. People always say, why do you put relational first? And it's because I really believe this is one of the biggest impacts we can have, is to have that again, I was just talking about that unconditional love, that how you define relational resilience is you go through the motions, you don't give up because another person needs you and you need them. That's interdependence. A huge human need is to have our lives observed. You know, when I go home tonight, I'm gonna tell my wife about this day, my challenges, the ups and downs. And so to have a friend, a significant other, just somebody that observes your life is one of the greatest needs that we all have. And I kind of tie that to that relational resilience where I see people crashing, when I see people oftentimes, really hurting. They don't have those support systems. And we're seeing research now, just 2 or 3 key people. I think I gotta have 20 friends. I need 3 good friends. Does that make sense? You got 3 good friends. Your mental health is gonna go up tremendously. Anxiety will go down. It's so powerful, but it's that I'm not talking about dependence, interdependence. Like for example, I said for years, if I never got invited to speak again, I'd go work in a 4 different fast food restaurants to put food in Cooper and Carson's stomach, my kid's stomach.
Sure.
And COVID hit, and it happened. And I'm like, I essentially went out of business. I'm a national speaker. I speak. Airplanes are shut down. My career was over.
The universe saying, okay, you said it. Let's see you do it.
Let's see you do it, man. And to make that comeback, it was almost and I had a great support system. And be very glad I did this on my own. Yeah. And they did far more than me, to be frank. And the people I work with, they're incredible. And
and you had employees to provide.
Yeah, and that interdependence. Yeah, we on it. And several of my employees literally stayed with us with no income, essentially. And I don't think we lost. I think we lost 1 employee during that time. We had no money to pay him. That's how much they cared about the mission of making sure children and families have the tools to thrive in. But that's that relational resilience. Is I need you, you need me. We're going to be here for each other. The next one is
before you move on, I do want to make this comment. As I have, from being together last night, and we've spoken on the phone in the last year, and I was honored to be on your podcast, the Resilience Breakthrough podcast. Yeah. And when we met back in 2016 and spent that time together, and I've seen things, I've observed, I've noticed, and I'm got to tell you, you have a special purpose for your life. I mean, and we'll talk more about some of this in a minute, but God, our Creator, has surrounded you with some great people.
Oh, absolutely.
Mama Jackson, who became your de facto foster system, right, as a child, and she could have just turned her back and said, no, I don't want him around Sean, but Sean advocated. Sean's another one. Moses, who I'd never even heard about until I was going to ask you about his dad, but
he's the key. He never wants us to talk about
your grandparents.
Yeah.
Dr. Cox at your university, Wendy.
Yeah.
These Dave Biesinger and others have been.
Yeah, Hans Mack will be my business partner.
You have a God-ordained purpose for your life, because honestly, I mean this. It sounds tongue-in-cheek, but I mean this, and as I said in the beginning, we should have never heard the name Christian Moore.
Yeah.
And I think at this point in the podcast, people can go, wow, we should not ever know who this guy is, but now you influence millions of people around the world. Yeah. So let's move on to the next type of resilience.
Yeah, and the next one is called street resilience. So when I started studying people...
Say what?
Yeah. When I started studying, I don't know where that came from. I started studying people, again, who had every reason to give up, and all of them would talk about, hey, someone didn't believe I could go to college, someone didn't believe I could get a livable wage, someone didn't believe I would be able to stay on this job or write this book or whatever. They're just like, all these people they're taking disrespect. All of them talk about feeling disrespected, and how they use the disrespect as a reason to prove people wrong, to push through. I was fascinated by that. I had a professor who came to me in college and said, Christian, if you can get a college degree, my degree is worth less. And I literally walked off that college campus in tears. And about 12, 13 years later, I found out I was in an introduction to school social work textbook. It's something called evidence-based intervention. So the professor actually had to lecture on my theories. Now you might say, Christian, you're being kind of cocky right now or arrogant. No. I'm being street resilient. You told me I'm not even good enough to be on this college campus. Now I'm in your damn textbook. I have value, but I should have had value before that. But it was that disrespect that really fueled me. And it's funny, people, I remember a couple years ago, I went to write this book. We've almost now sold 100,000 copies of this book.
That's incredible.
And all these people, even the person who's kind of helped me ghostwrite, I would write everything out, and she's this professional writer helping me do it, right? And so she taught at a university. I remember her sitting me down like the first day we're looking at, writing this book, and she's like, now you have to self-publish it. Like less than 1% of books are published on that. I looked at it, I go, oh, this one's gonna be published. She's laughing at me. And I had, the fact that she told me I couldn't do it, I knew we were gonna publish now. It ended up taking 4 years to write it, a lot of research. I got some incredible people to help me as well. If anybody out there knows 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Covey.
Covey, the gentleman who actually interviewed Covey and wrote down like 80 pages of notes, heard me talk about resilience and ended up working with me. His name's Brad Anderson. You'll see him in the intro to Brad's book and stuff. And he's one of the people that coined win-win. He's like, they win, you win, let's call that a win-win and stuff. He's an incredible human being. And he wrote the corporate curriculum for Franklin Covey. And when I talked to him about, hey, I think this is where resilience comes from, he literally quit what he was doing and came to work for me. So when I say I was a mentor, he would be like in the Hall of Fame of intellectual property, the most successful business book of all time. That's who wrote this book with me, is Brad Anderson. And he has passed away since, so I do want to honor him, and that's why I'm sharing that.
You had told me about him before, years ago. Yes.
Amazing man.
But before we move on to the next topic of resilience, I do want to, you said value. And something, I listen to it's inside my head. And I want our audience to know, whether you're watching or you're listening, I want everybody to know you have value. Your life is important. Your life is as important as the biggest celebrity that you look up to, or whoever you look up to. Your life is every bit as valuable as theirs is. You just need to believe it and know it.
It's interesting. I end every speech when I'm speaking to kids, and I end the speech by putting up a picture of New York City. And you have all those buildings. I'll say to the students, how much do you think those buildings are worth? They're like billions and billions of dollars. And I'll go, okay, if you took all the wealth, all the gold, all the silver in the ground, even the stuff we haven't pulled up and the oil we haven't pulled up, so all the wealth out on this planet, how much is that? Every building, everything that has economic value, how much is that? And of course, I don't know. So I make up a word, I call it $1 gagillion. So, and I'll just say, look, this is what I did not understand when I was your age. I'm only starting to understand it in, honestly, the last few years. Every human being is worth more than every building you'll ever see, all the wealth, the biggest banks, the biggest everything. We're all individually worth more than that. So when I drive, I want the listeners to do this for the rest of your lives. When you drive into any major city and you see the city pop up, I know you live in Austin, one of my favorite cities, and you see that Austin skyline, and one of my favorite skylines, I love it. And by the way, you have the best street in America there. But anyways,
we did.
So when I see that Austin skyline, and I'm gonna challenge you to do this from now on. When I see that Austin skyline, I remind myself, I'm worth more than every one of those buildings, and even the BBQ. And so
that's close second.
I know that's close second, but what I'm saying, but just to see that every time I pull into a major city, I remind myself, I'm worth more than every building in New York. And it's silly because we're 100 times. I shouldn't even use that as a metaphor because it's silly, of course. But children don't even know that. Yeah. So many kids don't. They'll look around, this world's intimidating. I'm like, man, you're far more powerful, far more important than anything your eyes are seeing. And so that's how I try to communicate that to
It's funny you mentioned this because, as you know, I'm a gratitude guy. I'm all about being grateful, and gratitude changes your life. It changes the prism you see the world through. Literally last week, I was thinking, would I trade my eyesight for $100 million? No. Would I trade my brain for $1 billion? No. Would I trade my heartbeat would I trade anything that makes me who I am for any amount of money? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
I would not.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would not. And that's not an ego thing. It's just simply, we forget. When I look at you, I see you. Yeah. It's not my eyes that see you. That's the conduit to the brain. The brain sees you.
Yeah,
yes. We don't think of it like that, but it's worth so much. And our minds are incredible machines. Yeah. They are resilient, and the brain is absolutely fascinating. It's greater than any supercomputer that will ever be invented.
Amen.
Every bit. So again, value. We are all value, and whether you believe in God or not, and I do, our Creator looks at us all the same. No matter where we are on the socioeconomic scale, or where we are in the world, whether we're living in Austin, Texas, Provo, Utah, South Sudan, Kenya, Moscow, we all look the same to Him, and we're His creation.
Not only do we all look the same, we're all 99.8% the same genetically.
Yes.
There is no difference between us genetically except for skin tone. And that shows up different times because of where we live in the hemisphere, all these things, if you understand the history of that.
And that's another podcast.
I won't get into that right now. But what I'm saying is, when I was a little boy, being raised in an African-American home, we play football, lamppost to lamppost. And all the white kids would say, why are you going to the black people's houses and stuff? And I was like, wow. And they thought that we were different. And one of the greatest rushes is just seeing how science is advancing. And as a little boy, I knew Mama Jackson was no different than me. I didn't understand biology and all the history of the world and stuff at the time. But now I do understand a lot of that. I'm like, man, I was right. When I was 7 years old, I knew there was no difference between me and Mama Jackson. We have different cultures, we have different ethnic backgrounds, but there's only one race, and that is the human race. And that is a scientific fact. That's not a debate anymore. We can look into a microscope and we know for sure the only difference is these skin tones and these things. That's, again, that anybody can Google it. Anybody who's hearing this for the first time, please get on Amazon. But please get on Google. I'm a little tired. Yeah, Amazon will teach you. I don't know what the hell Amazon. Anyway, but please Google that, because we are all 99.8% the same genetically, and we got to stop hating on each other, because when you're hating on anybody else, you're hating on yourself, because we're all one human family. There's one race, and it's we got to stop it.
There's always going to be jerks in the world, and there's always going to be division. There's always going to be racism, and I personally believe, my observation, I believe that racism truly is on life support, but the media and the politicians give it air. And so don't listen to them. Turn your TV off. Don't watch the news. Don't listen to politicians. Okay. I mean, it's all about division and fear, and goodness transcends all those things.
Amen.
All those things. It transcends politics. And so, but again, we that's a whole nother, and we can sit here.
We might need to do 10 of these podcasts.
I think we might. So there's a lot of rich stuff here, a lot of rich content, which is relevant and important, and I think people will get a lot. But we got to stick to what we're at. Okay. So you got resource resilience, but you're talking go to Google. So that's
Google's a huge resource. Absolutely.
My best friend is Google.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm probably a little bit opposite of you. I think one thing I'm enjoying this discussion with you, because I think you and me both have the same heart, same goals, same everything. I tell people, get more media, pay more attention to politics, because we live in a world, I believe, where we live in our silos and we bury our head in the ground. I think how we have breakthroughs to understand the human condition, to understand the people around us, is getting far more information. I agree with you. You got to have the filter. You better know how to know, and the filter's got to be, if it harms other people, you're probably getting bad advice.
Well, you got a mind. Mind can think.
Yeah, if it doesn't do the greatest good for the greatest number of people, it's probably not a good policy. So pay close attention to that. And but I'm a huge advocate of learning the opposite of what for example, the only phone I've ever owned is Apple, smartphone. And when I speak to large audiences, I'll have people pull up their Motorola or whatever, and I'll have people different, phones up, and I'll say to them, I'll say to Motorola people, hey, have you ever had any other phone? Is that the best phone? They'll just say, yeah. I go, your next phone? What are you gonna get? A Motorola. And then I'll say to the Apple user, hey, what's your next phone gonna be? And they go, an Apple, of course. It's the greatest phone in the world, man. Nobody touches an Apple. And I'll point out to them, the reason why that's the greatest phone in the world, it's all you know is an Apple phone. I've only owned an Apple phone, right? Mm-hmm. So you told me to get another phone, I'm gonna look at you like you're crazy. So our biggest blind spot is what we spend the most time with. Does that make sense? If I only spent time in a Caucasian home, a white home growing up, I would not have the insight after being raised in an African American home as well. Mm-hmm. So it's exposure. It's how much time we spend in something. So, if I only wear Nikes, I'm going to tell you the greatest shoe is Nike. Does that make sense? And so I really encourage people to spend time in the opposite. For example, I'm sure the audience has picked up, I'm a little more progressive. So I try to spend time watching Fox News because that gives me the other perspective. If people are very, conservative, they need to watch CNN a little bit more or whatever. Does that make sense? It's just, you have to expose yourself because in the real world, nobody's all right. Nobody's all wrong. We're all fighting this battle and there is no pure, complete, hey, this group is more superior, this group's less superior. All that is ways for us to be one up in a relationship. I'm more superior to you. It makes me feel good. Mm-hmm. That's not reality. But the only way people know that is to get more data, more information, and exposed to different life experiences in a way, metaphorically speaking. You gotta, if you are an Apple, get a Motorola phone. If you only, metaphorically saying that, is because we all think what we spend the most amount of time with is the greatest thing. I have a friend here, we're sitting in this incredible living room where there's a Christmas tree, a real live Christmas tree. And I have this debate with my friends all the time. And I say, did you grow up with a real Christmas tree? And they'll go, yeah. And then they'll always have a real Christmas tree in their house. Mm-hmm. I grew up with an artificial tree. And so I only had artificial trees because that's what I spent the most time with. And
I grew up with an artificial tree and I hated it, so I've always had real Christmas trees.
See, that's a breakthrough. That's a breakthrough. That's what I'm saying. But you're doing the opposite of how you were raised or what you were exposed to.
My motive was I hated the artificial. I thought it was like crap. Okay,
so I tell people, and it's actually data to show this. If you spend the most time with what you dislike, your view of that will change extremely fast. If someone's prejudice against a Hispanic family or something, if they went and lived with that family for a year, they would probably become the greatest advocate of the Hispanic community. Does that make sense? Because and they could be 100%. Oh, we got too many people moving into our, and it literally is lack of exposure. People are saying, "What did I learn from 7 million miles across this planet?" It's that right there. Mm-hmm. That's the most powerful thing I've learned. Is I have to watch myself. If what I spend, I'll tell you, the greatest career is public speaking. It's what I've done for 25. It's all I know. You know what I mean? So, and there may be 1,000 other careers just as good or better. But we only know what we spend time with, and so that's one of the most powerful things anybody's ever taught me. I'm sorry if I'm kind of going
what
I
I'm
wish
laughing
I could pass that on to
what I'm laughing at is here's a guy who makes his living doing public speaking with anxiety. I mean, off the charts anxiety sometimes. It's like, the number one fear that people have is public speaking.
Yeah, I don't recommend it.
Number two is death, okay? I mean, even if you muddle through the worst public talk,
really rather die.
You're still gonna be alive, right? You're still gonna be breathing. You're gonna go home and see your family that night.
Yeah. Right? I be really frank with you guys. About 3 years ago, I got to a point I couldn't even speak in front of my audience. I had a couple of panic attacks. And you have a panic attack, the room is kind of shaking. I start sweating everywhere. And then I'm thinking the worst case scenario constantly is I'm in a panic attack. Like, excuse me, this audience isn't gonna like me. This audience is already judging me because maybe my weight or the goofiness of myself or whatever, And it's not rational. It's just, I've given 1,000 speeches successfully. But when that panic attack, it's like I'm feeling everything from like the stomach flu to the room kind of spinning to intense judgment, and it's I wouldn't wish a panic attack on my worst friend.
Is there anything that you can pinpoint that says, okay, I know I'm gonna have a panic attack?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I start to do is, I think panic attacks with triggers can, of course, vary tremendously for different people. I start just kind of mulling over the worst case scenario over and over, and it's like that monkey brain. I can't stop it. I can't stop thinking that I'm going to crash in that keynote or whatever. And so it will start usually, even so for me, sometimes even a day before, and it just keeps building and building and building. And the minute I'm up in front of that audience, because my mind is focused on crashing for a couple of days, it crashes. And that's the power of, that what we project was going to happen is so powerful. And so, yeah, that's that I start feeling it in advance a little bit. And then now what I have to do, of course, is I got to flip that switch. I got to focus on what's right with me. I I talk to the anxiety now. I call it Mr. Anxiety, and I say, hey, I got to speak to these 2,000 people. You're my partner. You've never left me. I really don't know any time on this earth without some anxiety.
You've never left me.
Yeah, and I say, hey, Mr. Anxiety, you never left me, so we're doing this together. And then, and there's a lot of techniques you can do to stave off a panic attack. Like I'll look at a color in the room. I'll try to get present. I'll focus on the now. I'll remind myself of what I've accomplished in the past. So, but I had to get on some pretty intense medication to deal with it. I made a comeback, you know, and still to this day, public speaking at times can be terrifying to me. But I was talking to my son about this the other day, and he has some anxiety, and I was talking to me, and I just said, hey, it's exposure. I was exposed to now into the thousands and thousands of speeches. And so that desensitization therapy, so like if you're nervous, you're afraid of spiders, you know, one of the best treatments is to have a spider crawl on you eventually, not right away, but over time. And so,
I'll pass.
But it's exposure. It's exposure. And it's funny. The same thing, I've never thought this till right now, the same thing, this exposure that helps me get over my anxiety and stave off a panic attack, it's that same thing that can stop hate, it's exposure.
You're right.
Maybe
You're right.
One of the most important words in this world is exposure, exposure, exposure. Spend time with whatever group, people, culture, background, religion that you like less. Spend some time with it, and I promise you will have a completely different perspective, and you will love whatever that group is, unless it's some extreme crazy group that's really hurting, you know, themselves or others. But outside of that, spend time with what you're judging the hardest. And I'm not putting finger. I judge hard. It's hard as a human being. You know, we're judging. As a therapist, I'm trained to judge people even. And you know, again, that's one reason I love being around you, John. Is you're unconditional. I'm working on it. I'm not. You know, if I point the finger at every, you know, 3 fingers are pointing back to me. I'm the biggest hypocrite in the world. I want to be very clear on that. But yeah, exposure.
But you're not a hypocrite. I mean, because if you recognize that there might be a problem and you go to work on it, that's not hypocritical. That is saying, okay, I recognize something. I'm going to go do the first step to solving a problem is recognize that there might be a problem, and then you address it, right? Because none of us are given a manual for life when we're born. It's kind of like having kids. I wish they gave you a manual. So when this happens, look at page 544, and that's the answer to what you're going to deal with your child. But we don't have that luxury.
Amen.
I want to talk about rock bottom resilience. And I want to talk about what you are dealing with right now, because this just came up. In real time in the last 72 hours, and we set this up for me to be here earlier in January. So this was a game changer, and you're having to flip the switch in your own life. Could you share, first of all, what is rock bottom resilience? And then let's talk about where you are right now.
Yeah. So, you know, all of us have our own personal rock bottom. You know, that's different for different people. You know, some people's rock bottom, you know, might be a disease. It may be a child being sick, a relationship issue. You know, we all have a mistake we've made. Somewhere we've harmed another person. We all have our own rock bottom, and everybody has it. And so I try to respect where everybody is in their own rock, because sometimes we'll compare, oh, you haven't been through what I've been through, you haven't been through the pain. But I want to be, we all need to be really sensitive. And
when they say that, you're right. I haven't been through what you've been through. But empathy is shared experience. It's like when somebody who's lost a child. I know a lot of people have lost children to accidents, to suicide, to murder, such as Daryl Scott. And like, I can't empathize. I can't say to you, I know how you feel, because I don't. Empathy is shared experience. If I lost a child and I had these conversations with God, said, I don't really want to be able to empathize with those people, but I don't have the luxury of deciding what my future holds. He does. But it's like, if I have a shared experience, I can empathize. I can, because I've been through that. I've been through something.
Empathy is empathy is the key. No doubt about it.
But you can only do it through a shared experience. But anyway, keep going.
No.
Some people hit rock bottom and keep digging though.
So rock bottom, you know, is when you have every reason to give up, you continue to put one foot in front of another. And it's interesting, resilience takes place in a striving. It's not a destination. Like, I've never reached resilience, and I'm this expert on resilience. Resilience is never a destination. It takes place in the effort, in staying in motion. And we were talking about this on the way we were driving in, is taking care of the next 1 second 2 minutes, 10 minutes, one day at a time. And I appreciate what you've been talking to me about, just dealing with presence. You brought that up to me several times the last 72 hours. And, it's helped me. Last night when I went to bed, I took some of your advice on that. And so, yeah, those that have heard me speak before, like, man, Christian sounds a little bit different today, because this is a first speech I've given, or the first communication I've given out since probably dealing with the biggest rock bottom moment since my childhood, since some trauma in my childhood. I'm 52 years old, and yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks. If you're okay, if I share a little bit what I've been through here recently?
Just talk, just tell the story.
Yeah. So about 2 months ago, I started having a rash all over my body. I went to like 4 different doctors, and to itch almost over your entire body for 2 months, I felt like I was losing, my mind. I mean, literally, I'm just trying to get all this reprieve. I got a little bit of reprieve, but what gave me the reprieve was some hard drugs that I didn't do good on. They're really tough stuff, and I was just, I'm like, man, okay, I've overcome a lot. There's no way this itch is bringing me down, and I've had it, huge eczema my whole life. Not to get too personal to the audience, but hey, let's have a real conversation now. It's like my medical history. So my feet would break out. I'm just like raw hamburger, and I'm traveling all the time and all this stuff. And so, so I have huge tolerance, for severe itching, but I couldn't handle this. It was really impacting me mentally. And then on the 23rd of December, my house flooded and stuff. And I'm like, holy cow, I got this body rash. My house is flooded. And I'm just, pushing through everything. And again, people, what's a crisis to one person? I'm sure the audience think, well, you have a body rash and your house is flooded. I think that I've overcome way more than that. That's nothing. I get that. I hear that. And
but you also were giving talks, and there were some words you couldn't say.
Yeah. So my cognitive functioning was going, and I couldn't say the word. So I can say it right now. Determinologist. Dermatologist. Yeah. I couldn't say dermatologist because I had to go to, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even say the word of the person I'm going to. And I'm like a verbal assassin. I can say any word for my whole life. In the last few weeks, I'm losing lots of words, and I'm like, wow, what is going on? And so I visit all these doctors, and about 48 hours ago, a doctor pricked my finger, and they did some, assessment, and they found out I had diabetes. And really honest with his audience, I kind of had an inkling I probably did for too long, but a lot of people in my background, probably because of my anxiety, I didn't want to face being a diabetic. And to say I was addicted to sugar is an understatement. That's the fuel I used probably to deal with some of my trauma, and to travel to work 100 hours a week. A few minutes ago, I might have been bragging about working 100 hours a week. And a lot of experts told me there's a real consequence to working 100 hours a week. For me, the consequences, I far overdosed sugar to way too much. It gave me the fuel to work like a maniac and have, quote, I don't know how you define success, but to have some worldly success. And but I knew, and I even said to my wife for years, there'll be a consequence to pushing my body, this hard, because my entire professional career I've averaged 3-4 hours a night of sleep, and I'm pushing it. I'm this resilient expert. And it's funny just even talking about this. I feel a little hypocrisy about being resilient, but again, it's to be resilient is important, that we forgive ourselves, we don't judge ourselves. I'm struggling with myself, so I'm sharing this, but the kryptonite, one of the things that stops our resilience, John, faster than anything, is if we don't forgive ourselves. I've been pretty upset with myself for the lifestyle. I've been leading, last little while, and again, it caught up, and they said my blood sugar levels were over 700.
What should they be?
And they should be about 100, something 150 in that range, 80 to 100 something.
And what else did they tell you about a 700?
Yeah, they said I should either be dead or in a coma. And
it's a pretty rude awakening.
Yeah, you showed up right after the diagnosis for a few hours. And so I don't really believe it's a happen chance you're here, and you're one of the people, I'm glad that I'm able to share this publicly, with someone like you. And I feel, I feel like you're the right person here that I want to share this with. And so yeah, it's I think I'm a little bit shocked now. You know, the stages of grief and stuff, and so I'm just everything I've shared in this podcast, you know, so far, you know, I'm trying to tap into all of that, and it's really hard right now. And but you know, I also feel tremendous gratitude right now because, you know, as high as my diabetes, you know, diagnosis was and bad as it is, you know, I'm here, I'm fighting the fight. You know, I really believe something bigger than me, you know, enabled that to happen. My whole life has felt like a mission. And you know, I've had a charmed life. You know, I've dealt with some tremendous trauma, but out of a lot of my traumas has come an incredible opportunity. Incredible, you know, 52 years old, but I feel like I've lived 3 lives, and I've been able to travel 7 million miles around the planet. You know, less than 1% of people will ever experience that, and meet millions of people. So I'm like, you know, 150 years old, but I still want to be here for my wife, my kids, my family. I want to be here for myself too. But but yeah, it's so now I'm like, okay, I got a big speech next week, and you know, I'm scared to death right now.
It's cross country.
Yeah, it's in South Carolina. I don't want to let that audience down. You know, they prepare for a year, and you know, they book you as a keynote speaker a year out sometimes because they, you know, want to make sure you can be there and stuff. And yeah, I mean, my blood sugar levels are about 200 right now, 250 I think this morning. And you know, they want to get it down before I travel, and I feel this pressure on this race against my blood and to deliver for people and stuff. But man, I gotta take care of myself, and it's hard. I know there's a lot of people out there who are probably listening to me right now, who are caregivers, you know, incredible moms and dads, and incredible, you know, employees, employers. You know, we serve other people so much. You know, my whole life has been engaged in, you know, doing something for somebody else, and just for the first time in my life right now, I'm like, man, I gotta be a little selfish. I gotta walk an hour. The doctor said, try to walk 2 hours a day and do all this stuff. I'm like, man, I wouldn't be able to help. Man, the whole time he's telling me all the things I need to do to take care of myself, I'm thinking, man, I got a responsibility to these 20 people over here. I can't sit here and take care of myself right now. And I'm really working through right this second on taking care of me so I can take care of other people. It's the old oxygen mask, you know, metaphor. Yeah. You gotta fit the mask on yourself. I've heard that metaphor 1,000 times, right? I don't care about that damn metaphor, but I'm living it right now. I care about it now. You know what I mean? And so
I often say, Christian, that you got to take care of yourself first, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be worth anything to anyone else. That way, you produce the best version of Christian Moore for your family first, for your employees, for the people in South Carolina, and everybody else that you'll be speaking with and with.
And I want to say, I appreciate that. I'm going to follow up on that self-care, but I also want to say, I know there's probably a lot of people listening to me right now who have diabetes. Like, you're going to be okay. And I do acknowledge that. I know it's something that the doctors that they were saying it's the most treatable disease out there if you follow all the rules and make sure you get that insulin stuff. And so I want to pay respect to my fellow diabetics out there. I do want to say, because I told the doctor when I found out the cost of getting these resources, these services and stuff, just the insulin I need, and the cost was like $1,200, man. And I think, man, how many people, that's expensive for me. And I'm very blessed. I'm like, man, we have got to make sure more people, kids with diabetes, can access the resources they need to take care of themselves. And so for me, even what I'm doing right now, that's street resilience right there. And so I don't know what to do but to, when I go through a crisis, and go something. So the diabetes world, I'm in there with you, all my friends out there, and we gotta fight. We gotta help our other friends and family, our brothers and sisters that don't have the economic resources to be treated. I just think in the last 12 hours, how many people are dying of this disease that cannot access these resources, man. It blows my mind. And so, anyways.
That wraps up episode 2 of the Determined People podcast interview with Christian Moore. You know, Christian is, again, a fascinating guy. We talked a lot about resilience, and in the final episode, you're going to learn about what rock bottom resilience looks like. So until next time, be well.